Hello and welcome to POSK Online. We're just days away from the big game between England and Poland at Wembley, the venue of legends, the temple of football. And here at POSK Online, we thought we could bring you the stories of these games. The past with the famous 1973 game that we Poles keep talking about to this day. The present with the clash of titans between Kane and Robert Lewandowski. And the future with thousands of Polish kids born in the UK who are eligible to play for either team. In a special one-off program from the POSK Polish Center in London, we will be joined by the legends of the beautiful game and the experts from both countries as we are counting down the hours to the first whistle at Wembley. But before we start, we have a message from someone rather special who knows a thing or two about playing in games between England and Poland.
Hello to all my Polish friends in the UK. I understand you're doing a Polish-British history story, which is a great idea because obviously the two countries, we go way back. And I just want to know that if you're including the 1986 World Cup in that, because obviously that was a very important moment between our country and Poland, and it's also a very important moment for me because I managed to bag a hat-trick. I don't like to talk about it too much, but as you're doing a special on the history of it, why not? Hope it all goes well. Cheers.
Don't worry, Gary, we'll not forget it. It's a very important moment in the history of rivalry between Poland and England. Here in POSK, we'll have Ryan and Neil joining us online. Ryan Hubbard is an author of a book From the Partition to the Solidarity about the first 100 years of Polish football. And we also have Neil Jensen, an author and journalist. You can find him on the blog The Game of the People, as well as an author of a book about Central European football, Mital. Hi guys, thanks for joining us.
It's wonderful to be here, thank you.
Without any further ado, the rivalry between Poland and England, it did not start with the first international game between those two countries. It kicked off much earlier than that, or maybe it was a cooperation. My hometown club, Newcastle Łódź, seems to be one of the precursors of this relationship between England and Poland.
So back in the early 1900s, when Polish football was just beginning, Łódź was one of the sort of centers of Polish football in its early days. Łódź, as many people know, is a big manufacturing city. It was in the early years of its existence. It was in the factories of Łódź where football began its journey there. Among the city's population at the time was a lot of immigrants, particularly from countries like Germany and England. And yes, as you mentioned, Newcastle Łódź were one of the first Polish clubs, especially in Łódź. They were formed by a large German community, but it was an English coach who gave them their name. And they are one of the like I say, the early clubs in Polish history.
Ryan, I mean, all those information people can definitely find out in the book that you have written about the history of Polish football. It's in English, it's a great read, and there's a lot of information there. So looking at the way how the game was evolving in Poland, let's probably move forward to the post-war years. England were doing quite well back in early 60s. Not only they've won the World Cup, I actually have a match program from a game between Poland and England under 23 years old, with Bobby Charlton scoring a hat-trick and Jimmy Graves adding another one in England's 4-1 win. What happens in those late 50s, 60s as the two teams meet for the first time at the Goodison Park?
So particularly after the post-war years, there were, particularly from the Soviets and the communist government in Poland, they were very reluctant to let the Polish national team play against Western countries. I think in the 1948 Olympics, which was held in London, They actually refused to send a Polish team, and that was partly because it was A, being held in London, and B, they were drawn against the United States of America in that draw. So there was a heavy reluctance, but obviously as soon as they were drawn competitively against England, like you say, in those some of those early games, that's where the rivalry sort of began. The 1966 games, in particular, they were friendly games. The first meeting between the two countries at Goodison Park was, in the grand scheme of things, it was a very good 1-1 draw for Poland, especially when you consider it was only sort of 6-7 months ahead of the World Cup win for England, and it was a Poland team which wasn't particularly full of its more well-known players. You look at the squad, and there were players such as Jacek Gmoch, who was one of the bigger known names, Stanislav Ostizwo, the Górnik Zabrze defender. But other than that, there weren't many big names. Going on a few sort of months after that, it was right before England began their World Cup tournament. The last game that England played was at the Stadion Śląski in Chorzów. And that was a pretty strong England team. You look at the England team that played in that game in particular, there were 10 of the players who started in the World Cup final. The only one missing being Jeff Hurst, who was replaced by Jimmy Greaves.
He did quite well in that final, right?
Sorry, what was that?
He did rather well in that final in the World Cup.
Yes, yeah, but you have to look at the result. It was a 1-0 victory for England, which, considering they went on to win the World Cup, less than a month later, it could really be looked at as still a positive result for Poland.
Of course. Neil, maybe coming to you a little bit, I also have an interestingly a match program from Poland-England game. As you can see, there is a British flag here. So the question is how much the Polish hosts actually knew about the rivals. But on the other hand, Neil, how much English audience knew about Poland in those 60s, early 70s?
I would say very little, actually. Incidentally, the use of the British flag, or the Union Jack, as some people call it, was something that we used in this country right up until relatively recently, probably the 90s, when the Cross of St. George was used. But prior to that, it was, if you look at footage of the World Cup in 66, it's generally the Union Jack that's being flown. It's not something that we ever did, really. We never flew this Cross of St. George. It's a relatively recent thing. Regarding Polish football, I mean, people knew very little about Eastern European football or Eastern Bloc football. There was an air of mystery about it. When a British side played a Polish team in European competition, you may as well have been welcoming men from Mars, because we knew nothing about them. We only knew what we read in the newspapers at the time, and basically everything east of Germany was mysterious, was Soviet based. There was an air of mystique about it, and not necessarily a positive mystique. So it was very little was known about Polish football, and it wasn't rated particularly highly. Although that said, if you played away to a Polish side in European competition, you knew you were in for a tough game. When they in the opposite direction, I think Polish sides probably didn't fare too well, but certainly British sides going out to Eastern Europe Eastern Bloc were in for a tough time.
I'd just like to say on that as well. A couple of years ago, I had a chat with Hubbard, the former Poland and Górnik Zabrze goalkeeper, and we just talked briefly about one of the first meeting between English and Polish clubs in European football, and that was when Górnik Zabrze played against Tottenham Hotspur in the *61 European Cup. And that goes pretty much with what you were saying, Neil. The game in Poland, Górnik, they were dominant. They won, I think it was 4-2 in the end. And as soon as the Górnik went back to travelled over to London, they were hammered 8-1.
Yeah.
So it's like you say, like you say, there was an air of mystique about it, which I find fascinating.
Yeah. The other thing is that quite often, if an English side was playing in Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, they take their own food with them as well, because they didn't like the prospect of salami and black bread or something like that.
Sounds delicious to me, if you ask, by the way.
Yeah.
You're making me feel a little bit better about this match program where the Union Jack is used again. This is probably must have been a shock, given what you just told us. This is when England lost 2-0 to Poland, and they had to go and play at Wembley, at the famous Wembley. And this is the game. So why is it still so important for all of us? Why do we still talk about it? It's decades ago.
If I may sort of butt in there, I mean, basically, I remember both these games very, very well, and which I'm giving away my vintage, but basically, it was really, those two games signaled the end of an era for England. I mean, first of all, England took the World Cup qualifying group they didn't take it seriously enough, I think. They had Wales and Poland, and I remember reading way back that England, no problem, route to Munich, no problem. Poland and Wales. Well, they didn't win a game at home. Those two games, they drew both their home games, and they lost to Poland, which was really a disaster, because it signaled the end of Bobby Moore's career, really, as an England player. Also, I mean, it signaled the end of Lewandowski's career, because he got nobbled by Roy McFarland in that game, and he missed the 74 World Cup as a result. But basically, Poland was seen as the weak link in that group. And it was a big shock. Also, I actually interviewed Alan Ball about 25 years ago. And I was talking to him about that game, because he got sent off. And he said one of the things that really stayed with him was the crowd now, forgive my pronunciation. I call it Shozor, but I'm sure that's...
We'll take it.
Yeah, you'll take... But apparently the crowds in that part of Poland are pretty fierce, and they certainly were in the 70s. There were 70,000 people at this stadium, which was huge crowd and very passionate. And I mean, Alan Ball said that the crowd got him sent off. Although, having seen the video, I'd say there may be something in that. But certainly he wasn't the only guilty party in that game. But that defeat really sort of signaled the start of the end of Sir Alf Ramsey. And then in the second game, which actually was quite rare because it was a live game on TV as well in midweek. And I remember watching it and like seeing the ball flying in. And of course, Brian Clough had called Tomaszewski a clown, which really shows you how little regard we had for foreign footballers as well in those days. There was an air of arrogance that little Poland couldn't do us any harm. But by the end of the game, Sir Alf Ramsey was saying, it's the best performance I've ever seen of a foreign side at Wembley. Now, that's kind of strange, although it was a remarkable performance. But Ramsey played in the game where Hungary beat them 6-3 at Wembley. So
that's quite a compliment, right?
I think a very big compliment. But still, people didn't really take Poland seriously, I don't think. But a few months later, of course, they were made to, because their performance in Munich in the World Cup 74 was outstanding. And all of a sudden, you could easily name 6 or 7 Polish players without thinking, which is really a massive compliment to them, I think.
You have to remember as well that game, particularly the first one, it came not long after Poland's Olympic victory in Munich as well. And I mean, obviously, it was a few years before, my time, but reading back and researching about it, there was almost an air of British arrogance around it, not just England, but Wales as well. That the Olympics was an amateur tournament. Poland were a team of amateurs, and that their Olympic victory didn't really mean anything. And possibly even more so when they started their campaign, Poland. They started their campaign in Wales and were beaten 2-0. So I think going into that game at the Stadion Śląski, where Poland did emerge victorious, I can almost understand the English arrogance around it. That it was a team of amateurs. They'd just been beaten by Wales. But so perhaps there was an air of complacency around the English team.
So Poland went to the World Cup the following year, and we turned out to be rather successful. Neil, you're currently researching for a book where there's a part of that team. What makes it exceptional? Why did that team, gain so much popularity internationally?
Well, I mean, first of all, in Britain, England weren't in that World Cup, so we were looking for heroes in that World Cup, and because English wouldn't really support the Scots, they were looking for heroes, and basically they didn't really want to support Germany. They liked Holland, the Netherlands. I remember being a huge fan of Total Football and sort of Cruyff and people like that. But when the Poles came along in that World Cup, it really surprised us all. But also the way they played a very fast flowing game, which was really exciting to watch. And also they were slight underdogs, even though by the time they got to the second stage, people were saying, hey, hang on, this team could actually win the World Cup. I remain convinced to this day that they were beaten by gamesmanship. And I'm sure all you Polish people out there probably feel the same, because I don't know if you recall, but they played a game against Germany in the second stage, and the pitch was pretty waterlogged. And
I couldn't possibly comment, but there is something about the rain that, it still remains in our psyche that ironically also reflects in the rivalry against England, as we found out a decade ago.
Yeah. Basically, they were beaten because they couldn't play their normal game against the West Germans, and they won 1-0. But they were very unlucky. I mean, I think Poland v the Netherlands would have been a wonderful, wonderful final. And the West German Netherlands final was pretty good, but I think Poland v the Netherlands would have been an absolutely wonderful final.
I'm sure we're going to read about it in your forthcoming book. You both, Ryan and Neil, you guys mentioned that the way how both teams were performing over the next decade or so, of course, has changed. Ryan, how can we look at Poland until 86? I mean, how successful that team was, and what was the mood in both camps as Poland met England in Monterrey?
Well, you have to go on the back of, I suppose, the political and economical situation in Poland during the 70s as well. Particularly the early 70s, it was a very prosperous time for Poland. You had the reign of Edward Gierek, who brought in all these policies. He almost pulled Poland westwards, and I think that generated a lot of positivity in Poland. And when they won, or they did so well in the 1974 World Cup, they went on to finish second, frustratingly, in the Olympics a couple of years later. And although they did have a bit of a disappointing World Cup in '78. They sort of regenerated themselves, a bunch of new players, the likes of Boniek, Bunsol, Młynarczyk, who sort of pulled that team back upwards, back to the '82 World Cup. During that time, I think, as Neil alluded to, it was, I think, a sort of, the 70s has been a bit of a gradual decline for the England team. Moore's captaincy and his career had come to an end. Ramsey had obviously lost his job after the 73 games. And they didn't qualify for, I think it was two World Cups in a row. So there was almost a massive contrast. It's almost as if fortunes had switched completely. But after that 82 World Cup, where Poland had done so well again, there was a bit of a political change in Poland. You'd had martial law, during the 82 World Cup, and the political changes and a lot of economical changes in Poland, and things had started to change completely. And by the time they entered the 86 World Cup, the golden generation of the 70s had completely gone. The early 80s team, the likes of Boniek, were approaching their end of their career. And, there wasn't really the players coming through to replace them. So by the time it got to 86, the fortunes have changed completely again.
That Boniek guy, I wonder what happened to him, by the way. I hope you don't mind if I share the news that you are currently researching some topics on Poland 82 World Cup, that story. But okay, Gary Lineker has asked us to discuss Monterrey moment. Again, the fortunes turned. He scores a hat-trick. England are through. Poland go back home. And the next couple of decades, it's a bleak picture for Polish fans whenever we drew England. And we drew England almost every single qualifier.
Polish football changed completely in that time, especially upon the fall of communism. You had all of their better players moved abroad at an earlier age. We were even talking about it pre-show about the amount of Polish people obviously moving abroad, emigrating to countries such as the UK, and Poland started to lose out on talent in that respect, and it was just a very bleak time for Polish football. There was a lot of problems with corruption, a lot of hooliganism, which also perhaps had an effect. And at the same time, you had the emergence in England of the Premier League, which boosted English football dramatically, and it was on the build-up. You had the World Cup in 1990, obviously, where England eliminated Poland in qualification. And as you said, I think it was pretty much every tournament bar Euro 96, which England automatically qualified for the next decade, that the two teams met. So again, it was. I think it's been very rare that England and Poland have actually met each other when both have been at the peak of their powers, shall we say. And I suppose the upcoming game is probably one of the first times where it's really going to have happened.
No, that's interesting indeed. Neil, in your work, you often write about football in countries going through transformation, either economic or social. And so has Poland changed a lot since early 2000s when Poland joined the EU in 2004. We probably can talk about a bit of a local derby almost when Poland play England, given how many Poles, myself included, live now in England and the UK. Where is Polish football at the moment when you look at that history, and do you think that we are now coming back closer to see Poland competing against England on the football pitch?
A difficult question, really, Robert, because as Ryan alluded to there, I mean, the Premier League has leapt so far ahead of most leagues around Europe that, unfortunately, and I do say it with a slightly heavy heart, in a lot of countries, their domestic leagues have suffered from the sort of globalization of the game, really, which has been good in some respects, but a lot of domestic leagues now are struggling, really, in terms of crowd. I do actually think that Polish crowds went up a couple of years ago. They seem to go up quite a bit, but I think it's very, very.
Yeah, with Euro 2012, I mean, we have built so many new stadiums over there. That's
I've been to one in Warsaw. It's but you've got some good stadiums, no doubt about it. But
well, good stadiums,
very
but
difficult.
There's no roof in some of them, or we didn't really use that. So we built a beautiful stadium and we don't close the roof. So that game definitely is our memory because it was postponed by one day. due to the rain. So Lewandowski is emerging as a global superstar, if I can say that. He did play also in the last game that when Poland faced England at Wembley, that England won 2-0. He, as a player, has developed. That will be the 20th time Poland will face England. England has only lost one, that game in Chorzów. Lewandowski is at the peak of his career. Can he take Poland over the line and secure that second victory?
I think you alluded back to the games in 2013. That was a time when Lewandowski's showings in the national team were not what we'd really expect of Lewandowski. It was under the reign of Waldemar Fornalik, who lost his job after the defeat at Wembley. He could never really get, I say, the best out of Lewandowski. He struggled to get anything out of Lewandowski, really. It was this strange period where Poland had come off the back of a disappointing, an underwhelming performance at Euro 2012. And they were starting to develop a strong team, but as I said, they struggled to get anything out of Lewandowski. I think he only scored a handful of goals during that qualifying tournament. Since then, we've had Adam Nawałka in charge of the Poland team, who did manage to get the best out of Lewandowski. But then we've had the reign of Jerzy Brzęczek since then. And again, it's been a very similar situation to how it was under Fornalik. So now that Brzęczek has moved on and Poland have Paulo Sousa at the helm, it will be interesting to see which way it goes, whether he ends up getting the best out of Lewandowski like Nawałka did, or whether he goes down the route of the other two. And that could be hugely dependent on how Poland do against England and in the rest of the qualification group.
Well, no interview in football can end without asking about predictions. So where would you be placing your ideas in terms of how this match can play out? What do you guys expect? Maybe Neil, you will tell us first.
I think 1-0 England.
So Lewandowski will not score a goal?
No, I don't think so.
Thanks for having you, by the way. Ryan, what about your prediction?
Again, it's difficult to see Poland winning the game. I'm hoping being optimistic by saying that I think Poland might sneak a draw. But I think that is being quite optimistic, to be honest.
Optimism, it's something that we definitely believe in. So thank you very much for that. As you can clearly see, this conversation can be much longer as the history between those two nations is quite rich. So once again, Neil and Ryan, thank you very much for joining us.
A pleasure.
And now, stay with us to find out more as we speak to coaches and scouts trying to spot the best of Polish talents in the UK. But first, Jakub Krupa has an interview with Les Ferdinand, former England international that currently works for QPR just down the road from POSK Polish Centre in West London.
So joining me is Les Ferdinand, former England international, striker for QPR, Newcastle, Tottenham, West Ham, Leicester City. One of the panelists will be very keen about that. And today, the director of football at Queen's Park Rangers, just around the corner from POSK, so a very local team. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Les, you played against Poland in World Cup qualifiers, just like the game this week, twice, in 1993 and 1996. Did you ever have, approaching these games, any sense of history in these games for football reasons? And obviously there's this game from 1973 that Poles keep talking about even to this day, or perhaps because that's one of the not so many successful games for us, but also because of obviously so many Poles in the UK. Did you ever have any kind of feeling that this game in any way was special?
I think what we, because it was a qualifier, that was the main thing. We had to get through to the qualification stages, and obviously Poland always had good teams, and we knew it was never going to be an easy game. but it was one hurdle that we feel we needed to get over. And what we did know was on that night at Wembley, the Polish side was going to be well represented in terms of the supporters.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, in the first game, you had a fairly good start to that game. You scored in the 5th minute. I watched this goal. I mean, what a touch! I mean, I wish I had that kind of touch. Do you have any memories from that game? One of your first goals as well for England.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I think it was my second. Probably it might have been my second goal for England at the time, and I just remember the ball. You know, it's funny when if someone has spoken to me about it and said, "I just remember scoring against Poland." It's when they give you that little prompt, you go, "Okay, yeah, I remember blah blah playing the ball over the top and me taking a touch just on the inside of on the edge of the penalty area, on my left foot managed to get myself in the penalty area, and then I managed to curl it with my right foot, much to your disappointment, but much to my glee."
That's a fairly detailed description of that goal. You do have good memory of that goal. Now, obviously, you then played against Poland again 3 years later, and then it was Poland who opened the scoring with Marek Citko. Again, one of the goals we Poles keep talking about to this very day. But then England came back with 2 goals from Alan Shearer. Do you remember anything from that game? I read somewhere that before the game, and I don't know how players were, whether you as player were familiar with that, there's this kind of ceremony celebrating the Three Lions single, you know, the football's coming home. Obviously, that was the time when there's hype about that.
Yeah, there was a lot of hype about it. There was a lot of talk about it, and I think at the time we'd got a rendition of it. So there was a lot of that going on in the changing rooms before the game. So that sort of like bolstered us, that get us up on a high, and we were ready for the game.
Any memories from the game itself? Obviously, again, you didn't score in this one, so at least your kind of hits against us are limited.
Yeah,
but any memories from that game, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like myself and Alan Shearer playing up front, and that was a rare occasion for us. And you know, we'd gone through a season at Newcastle playing together, and everyone realised that me and him could play together up front for England. So it was one of the rare occasions we got to play up front together for the national team.
Mm-hmm. Both games you played took place at Empire Stadium, known best to Polish fans as Wembley Stadium. Obviously, in front of packed stands with great support you had both from English fans and Polish fans. This week's game sadly will be played obviously behind closed doors. How much does it change? Obviously, you're one of the lucky ones. You get to go to football and see players play these days. But how much of a different experience that is, both for players and obviously for people kind of cheering back from home?
Yeah, it's a strange, obviously a strange time, and we have to keep everybody safe, and unfortunately, it's very limited to the people that we can have in a stadium. It kind of like reminds me of my early playing days as a player when I look at it now, and when I've been going to the games. When I first joined Queen's Park Rangers, what you used to do was you used to play as a reserve team player. You always played at the stadium, whatever team you played against, you played at the stadium, and you'd play there, and there'd be a handful of supporters who took their afternoon off work and came to watch the game. So you may play in front of 100 people, you may play in front of 50 people, and because of the fact that the media are allowed into the ground to watch games today, you've got opposition scouts. If you're playing a team within 3 games, they're allowed to send someone. So when you add the numbers up, you're probably playing in front of the same amount of people that I used to play in front of years ago, and it's just it's pretty surreal in the fact that you're in this massive stadium. You can hear everything that players are saying on the pitch. Normally you can't hear a word that they're saying. You can hear everything the manager is saying to them. So it is very, very different, and it almost feels like I can't explain it I can explain it from a player's perspective, because when I used to play, it was like you wanted to do well, but there's no euphoria when you score a goal, and no one jumping up behind the goal and stuff like that. So it is a little bit strange in terms of that, and that might be the reason why we see so many high-scoring games at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, so many Poles resident in the UK. Obviously, games between England and Poland were the special ones. Where I think someone called it the Derby of England to me, essentially saying the largest community, obviously, and the second largest community of Poles in the UK, in that sense. And obviously, would have tremendous numbers of fans and tremendous atmosphere at the game, and all of that missing. I guess for players, surely that will be a bit of a loss ahead of what is essentially still a big game.
Yeah, massive game, and it'll be a shame. I think every single player. There's not a player I know that doesn't want to play in front of a crowd. You know, that's where you get your buzz. That's where you get your euphoria. And I always remember, the old Wembley, as you know, was what I played in, and there was something about walking up that tunnel, and you could see the opposition. They used to quake in their boots because you're going up this tunnel, and the noise that used to come out as you got to the end of the tunnel, and that was always you always felt that was to your advantage. I think in this modern stadium and the way it is, a lot of teams go there wanting to play in this. You know, there's the intimidatory atmosphere that was there before isn't quite there now. Even when it's a full house, I still don't believe it's like it was before. So you look at players coming to this modern stadium, they look at it and they think, yeah, I want to apply my trade here. I want to play well here tonight. So I'm not sure it's as much an advantage to the England team as it was before.
Yeah. Coming to this week game, obviously England will be the favourites. And there are even some saying, you are among the top contenders for the Euros if they go ahead this year. Do you think it's a justified view to say, England is up there in fighting for the best team in Europe, or is it just perhaps a bit early and a bit hype, or what do you make of that?
I think if you look at the record between England and Poland in recent times, I say recent times, in quite a long time, England have always seemed to have had the upper hand. So for people making England favourites for this game, you can understand that. But I think with the players that Poland have got within their ranks, it would be very foolish of the English team, and I'm sure they wouldn't, and the staff, to take this game lightly. There's one man in particular who, I know that the England fans won't want to see, but, if he plays, anything can happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get to him in a second. But first, I wanted to ask you about someone who, on the opposite side of the pitch, who'll be terrorising Polish defence. It's someone who you know well, Harry Kane. You coached him at Tottenham and helped him to get some playing time, I understand, when he was a very young player and kind of struggling to make his breakthrough in the team. Do you think Polish fans fear him today as much as they once feared Lineker, Shearer, Sheringham, or good yourself as well?
Yeah, no, I think without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, Harry's proved himself to be one of the outstanding strikers in not just in Europe, in the world at the moment. If you look at his goal ratio and the goals that he's scoring, I think, any team that he plays against, be it at your peril to underestimate him and treat him lightly.
I think definitely there's a lot of fear about him coming up there and scoring a hat-trick like some players did in the past, or even one goal in the 5th minute. I think we will still not like that. You alluded to that. Obviously, the big Polish name in the team, Robert Lewandowski, he's scoring like a machine these days and kind of going for all the records in Bundesliga and Champions League and so on. If you were to choose as a coach, who'd you like to top your team and kind of play up front, Lewandowski or Kane?
Jeez.
I know that's a difficult question. I understand it. It's causing some friction among QPR stuff as well when you talked about it. Some people there.
Yeah, you know what? Wow, it's so tough because Lewandowski's playing in the Champions League. He's playing against the best and he's scoring against the best. And I like both the players. I like both their applications. I like what they do. They don't just score. They can score left-footed, right-footed, headed goals. If you was looking for the two outstanding, like I said, two outstanding strikers in world football, it'd be very tough to choose between the two of them. I'm a big Harry Kane fan. I work with him. I know what he's capable of. But I've also been a big Lewandowski fan. I think I love the way he plays football, the goals that he scores, and both of them are made for the big occasion. So it's very, very difficult for me to choose.
Obviously, we hope that's going to be a great game because of that, because of both of them being at the top of the game. But he always talked about Kane being, in particular, someone who you know from very early in his career, who's extremely hardworking, staying extra hours just to practice and kind of putting that extra shift in there. Again, do you think that's what makes him such a great player these days?
Yeah, and I think all the top strikers in the world, and not just the top strikers, but the top players in the world, everyone says the same thing about them. They're the ones that stay behind. They're the ones that practice. They're the ones that do more of this, more of that, more of the other. And then we sit here and we wax lyrical about them, and then people go, you know, they were just a special talent. No, they were a special talent, but they maximised that talent. Where the other guys might go home a little bit earlier and not maximise the talent they've got. These guys have maxed out their talent, and you just have to sit there, take your cap off, and bow to them.
Stay behind and annoy the groundkeeper as well.
Exactly.
Staying on the pitch. Look, in your current role at QPR, as I said, our local team, so we very much wish all the best for the season as well. You obviously get to see a lot of international talent. A few years back, you've even had a Polish player, Paweł Wszołek, Polish international, play for QPR for quite some time, and very warm welcome from QPR fans as well. What's the perception of Polish football and Polish footballers these days? Is it just all about Lewandowski, or is it much more than that?
I think it's much more than that. I think there's an appreciation of the skill, the quality, and the style that Poland play in. And I think more and more players are cross-bordering and going, getting experiences in different areas of Europe, as well as the UK. So there's a high regard for the players, their work rate, their ethics, and the way that they play football, their application to what they do. And I just see more and more players coming over. In my position, I get umpteen messages throughout the day, throughout the weeks, throughout the months about Polish players are playing and doing well, and so we keep a keen eye on the Polish leagues. Anyone
on the radar, or you just want to keep that to yourself and not disclose?
Someone's listening to this and then they pip us at the post.
Now, looking into the future, one of the things Polish fans are particularly excited about is a potential generation of British Polish or English Polish players born in the UK to Polish parents who could be eligible to play for both countries. I mean, we know there's one such case of James Tarkowski, who sadly chose the wrong country to play for and already made his debut for England. But do you think there's something to look out for? This is something that we will see more of?
Yeah, most definitely. As you said, a lot of Polish people have settled in the UK now, made it their home, and they're having children who can play for both nations. And as long as England keep winning, then I think we'll get the majority of the strike. So long may it continue.
Given the current match record between Poland and England, I think it will be difficult to convince them otherwise. Look, last final question then. QPR, obviously a West London team, lots of Polish people living in the area. Why do you think they should support you guys?
Because we're their local team, and if they're having kids and they want their kids to come to anywhere and want a good education in football, we're the place to come to.
Definitely, we'll pass that message on. Thank you very much, Les Ferdinand. Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you. Take care.
welcome back to the second part when we will talk about the future of England and Poland and how this rivalry or collaboration will develop. I have two guests in the second panel. Joining me here in our studio is Emil Kot, who is the director of scouting at Wisła Płock in Polish Ekstraklasa, as well as the first team coach at Balham here in England. And joining us online from Norwich is Przemysław Soczyński, who is the coordinator for Polish Football Association, looking for young talents in the UK and trying to find some new diamonds to join Poland national team. First question, Przemek, probably to you, is about what's happening in the UK. Why is Polish FA even looking at the English or British market for new talents? Apparently there's 20,000 kids born to Polish families in the UK every year. Can we expect a new Lewandowski to actually be born somewhere in the UK?
Hello everyone. Hi Robert. Thank you for having me in this show. I think what the Polish FA decided is because there are so many Polish people here, as you mentioned, 20,000 people born every year and 1 million Polish people living here. It was a natural that Polish FA wanted to have some presence in here to be able to identify those talents and to be able to find those little diamonds. And yes, I truly believe and I truly hope that one day we will have a player born or raised in the UK who will be the top player for the Polish national team.
So when it comes to the academies, do you see that there is an increase of Polish players in the academies across the UK that you can scout?
Yes, it's changing every year and you can see it. So I have been doing it since 2017 and every single year there is more and more players. And now those parents and kids who moved here in 2004 when the European Union opened the possibilities for everyone to come here, now they're 14, 15, 16, and they break through the academies, they get scholarships, they get first team debuts. So from my experience, in every single academy from Premier League to League 2, there is a Polish player, at least one.
Fantastic. Emil, you work with some of those young players and you actually look out for the talents at Wisła Płock. What's the difference in the player development between English and the Polish system? What sort of characteristics players gain here that they wouldn't gain if they were developing their talents in Poland?
Right, first of all, hello everyone. There's, I think, massive difference between Poland and England. First of all, the just academic structure in UK is massive. It's totally different than what we've got in Poland. I think that's the first massive difference, because we don't have something like split between typical grassroots level and the academy level, like probably Przemek know it very good. So I think that's the main point. The second one is just the coaching. It's totally different style of coaching in UK, and it's totally different style of learning football from the coaches. So I think there's loads of differences, but I don't want to say that in England is better than in Poland, because we've got totally different mentality, we've got totally different environment in Poland and in England as well. So it's all about the football pitches, football facilities, just tools to coach the
We like to compare, and we often talk about the English Championship and Polish top flight Ekstraklasa. How would you compare the quality of the players if they were to move actually from England to Poland? Would they actually find their feet, ironically, in Poland?
I think every single one from Championship can go to Polish Ekstraklasa and then play there, mainly because of physically, they're strong, they're quick, they're ready to play on high intensities. So I think that's the main key and main benefit for them. Maybe from tactical side they can struggle a little bit, because I think that's another different between the Polish football and English football. Even I spoke with a couple of players who just joined Polish teams in the last few months. The English players or Polish players born in UK.
That's a new phenomenon, really, right?
Yeah, of course. So mainly what they're saying, it's just, hey, coach, listen, I've got like 3 or 4 sessions per week about just tactical only, just typical tactical sessions. In UK we had just 1, sometimes 2. So I think that's another difference. But I think, yeah, every single player from Championship can fit Polish Ekstraklasa.
Okay, so this is a completely new dimension. This is not something that we've seen so far. Only so far 3 players, English players, played in Ekstraklasa. Can we expect some more coming, still benefiting from what we have after Brexit? You know, is it easier for them to come to play in Poland, or is it difficult?
That's the good question. I think we had 3 players in the past in Polish Ekstraklasa. It was Eddie Stanford, if I'm not wrong, playing for Legia Warsaw. We had Rashid Yusuf playing for Arka Gdynia, and probably the last one is Tom Hattrick, who even won the championship with Piast Gliwice.
Wow.
So we had 3 of them. But I think in the next couple of years and months we'll have more, because now I can see that lots of players from English academies joining the Polish clubs, which is interesting. But they're not joining the top clubs in Poland, but they're going straight to lower divisions. They're going to league third division in Poland, which is the Druga Liga. They're going to Trzecia Liga, which is the fourth level.
That is confusing, by the way. So,
but you know what I mean. So they still joining the teams.
So they don't necessarily go to the top flight. They go to the other divisions.
Yes, I think they're just looking for some good league to develop and show the skills, and that's the another thing which we need to, I think, make a point, that the players from UK who just are released from the academies, there's lots of them on every single year, as Przemek knows probably, that there's thousands of really good players with nice potential to play professional football across the world, but they're just looking for some good place to develop, to show the skills, and just back to this football path to play again in professional football. So some of them, they're choosing to go to Poland just right now. Even in winter transfer window, I had 5 or 6 conversations with the players asking me for the club in Poland. Can you just help me to find any club in Poland, which is interesting. I know that these players personally, so I know they are really good. A couple of them joined, I think, 5th tier clubs, but it's something like just the first step in Poland. I'm 100% sure that they will develop and they will go up maybe in the summertime to some better clubs.
Well, I know one Englishman that really likes Polish football, and he's been paying attention to the rivalry and the history between those 2 countries. John Cross, chief football writer for the Daily Mirror. John, thanks for joining us. What's the history of that? Where does it come from? And what are your best memories of games between England and Poland? There has been a few, of course.
Okay, so why is there such England and Poland history? I think, from what I know, it dates back, obviously, to that famous game at Wembley. Tomaszewski, is that right? How to pronounce it? I hope so. 1973, the crazy game, the mad goalkeeper, the huge disappointment, the Shilton mistake, England missing out. It was a disaster for English football since then. That is the rivalry right there. And I think it's just grown and grown. It just so happened, I think we went through a period, it probably wasn't, but every tournament, every qualifying campaign seemed to draw England in the same group as Poland. I mean, it was just remarkable. Couldn't get over it. What is my best memory of an England-Poland game? Well, I tell you very, very clearly, easily, is, you know, you could look at England scrapping for 1-1 draws in Poland, getting results and stuff. But I just look back upon that game in 1986 when England had to win by a certain margin. to qualify from the World Cup qualifying group. There was so much expectation then, and then basically England supposedly had better players. And what were they doing? Couldn't find a right winning formula, couldn't find the right team. All of a sudden they seemed to find balance, and they seemed to find a striker in Gary Lineker that suddenly discovered where the net was, and they couldn't then stop scoring and winning and playing well. And they found that formula and winning team, and then basically it went on from there. England's victory over Poland, that's my best memory of an England-Poland game.
Over the years, English football has also changed. It was perceived to be a physical game. How has it evolved now, and what can we expect from English national team and the players its system is producing?
I think that actually, in many ways, England is now wising up. I think we're wising up with our kind of coaching and our philosophy and our generation. But for years, I still think of English football as perhaps lacking something technically that countries like Poland had, and were better than us. Technically, we had the physicality, we had the sort of physical power and prowess, but we didn't always have the technical ability of, you know, Lato or those kind of Boniek, and the different players, different times. So yeah, it's. I think that basically it's without doubt. I think that basically, you know, parts of Europe have brought and introduced a great deal to English football and improved it.
James Tarkowski, or Tarkowski, as you probably would prefer to pronounce his surname, decided to represent England, even though he was eligible to also play for Poland. Do you think that in the future, other players, when they will be presented with that question, they may choose differently?
The Polish-English generation is a really interesting concept, actually, and talking point. I'm not completely convinced that James Tarkowski, I hope I got that right, is a great advert for that, actually, simply because I think that Tarkowski is very, very reliable, very dependable, and although he's obviously won England caps and been called up for England, it does make you think at times, perhaps, whether, you know, he's a good advertisement for electing to play for England, because if you don't get that many chances, then basically, you know, I think players with dual nationality, or at least perhaps the opportunity to play for more than one country, might look at that and say, well, am I going to get a better opportunity to play for Poland or England? Listen, I actually think that is a really good talking point, because I think that there's a new generation coming through, isn't there, increasing kind of links between Poland and England. You know, I like to think of London as a multicultural city, England as a multicultural place. I hope that still hangs and is true after Brexit. Let's see. But I do actually think that basically, my personal view is that if you have that sort of heritage, you're sometimes more proud of the heritage, even though it's become a bit more remote, than your new adopted country. Let's see how that works. But I do think England are very, very, you know, much more expansive on who they try and recruit. They try and recruit the best talent, where years gone by, they were always afraid, I think, of trying to get, you know, players who perhaps have that dual nationality or was born elsewhere. Now England are far more open to kind of, they want the best talent, and if that means that they qualify for England, that no problem at all. So they embrace that. I do think that the battles become a little bit more intense, and it will be interesting to see how it works out over the next few years, because I do think, you know, it's obvious that we are going to see an influx of new talent sort of crop up really over the next 5-10 years. And I do think it'll be an eye-opener for England. I still think that if I were in that position, I'd still be quite tempted to, you know, report up for Poland. But I think the pressure will come from clubs to report for England, because, you know, I think it can increase your value. Whether that's right or wrong, please don't get me wrong, I don't think it is really, but I do think there'll be pressure on that, and basically also because of greater restrictions on homegrown players and that sort of thing, and quotas. So I do still think it will be very much in the melting pot, that one.
This is fascinating insight from John. John Cross, Chief Football Writer for Daily Mirror. Przemek, judging by the words and ideas that John just shared with us, it sounds like your job should be much easier. Would you think that other players like Tarkowski, or the next Tarkowski, they would say, actually, I want to play for Poland? How do you see that changing?
It's already happening, actually, and I think we need to look into every case individually, because we have two groups of players. So one group is like James Tarkowski, who was born here, has very strong connections with England or other UK countries. They don't speak fluent Polish. And we have another group of those youngsters who most of them were born in Poland and they still speak Polish. They have Polish passport. So there are actually like two routes. And we have players under my radar scouting for Polish FA. We have George Miel, for example, who was born here. His father was born here, but he's got Polish national now citizenship, and he already played for Poland. So it's really hard to predict, because some of the players, they feel really strong connection to Poland because their parents, they visit Poland every single year. They speak in Polish. They, for example, in London, they have a lot of Polish friends in school. When someone is living in more rural areas, or mom is Polish and father is English, it's a little bit different story, because in the village, for example, you have only English friends. You only speak in English at school. You speak at home in Polish only with your mom or with your family from Poland. So it's really hard to say, and you need to look at those players individually. And then, because in my opinion, it's my personal opinion, like the environment around you will drive this. Who do you want to play for? Or at the moment, we already have a few players like Philip Marshall or Hubbard. They have been called up by England, and the Poland want them as well. And it's really hard to predict which way it will.
And why is it always the goalkeepers? You just mentioned the two Polish, the Polish eligible goalkeepers that decided to play for England.
No one knows. Yeah, no one knows. So at the moment we have 7 goalkeepers born in 2003 in many different clubs. So 2 in Liverpool, 1 in Newcastle United, Manchester United, Aston Villa, 2 goalkeepers, Ipswich Town. So there's a lot of them, and I've had a lot of conversations with many different people, and no one knows why so many goalkeepers are Polish.
Let's get to some bit of like a nitty-gritty of the business. How do you scout for the federation? What sort of things, in few words, if you can tell us, how does the work working for a foreign federation in another country and looking for talents?
I must stress that English clubs are very, very helpful. English, Scottish, Welsh clubs are very helpful. So every time if we identify that the player is Polish, and how we identify it, it's through parents who send emails to Polish FA, or we have a platform called POSK.pl, and then you can register there, and based on this profile, we would contact the club and the parent. And we have coaches from English academies or Scottish academies contacting Polish FA. And we have a player, we think he's a great prospect. He's got Polish roots. So it's so nice that every time you send an email and you're asking for videos, or you're asking for the opinion about the player, or you're asking to speak with the coach, every single time English clubs are so open that we have no problems at all. I don't feel disadvantaged that I'm from Poland, and I think we are treated the same level as English FA in terms of players.
Oh, that's such a great story, to be honest with you, and it's amazing to hear about those collaborations to give those young players a chance, at least on the federation level. Emil, when you work for a club, is it different when you try to look for the young talents emerging in the UK and thinking, how they can be of some use for a club?
Yeah, of course. This market is just opening for us at the moment. So lots of clubs in Poland are looking for now UK markets, especially for the players with the Polish roots. We, as a Wisła POSK, we are looking now for the players with Polish roots in UK. We've got 5 scouts in UK, in different parts of UK. It's not they're not only Polish people, so that's a good point. We've got one Scot who's just our fan. A fan of Wisła Płock.
So you operate in English, right? Or
yeah, of course. Yeah, but it's interesting fact that we've got one Scottish guy who is just supporting Wisła Płock, and he's working for us at the moment in Scotland. We've got, as I said, we've got a couple of people just working for us in UK at the moment. As we know, we are just in another lockdown, so we can't work properly on the pitches to have a look on the players, but. We've got something like database with some names and surnames of the players where we can go and watch the players. But of course, we are not looking for the players playing in Man City or Man United academies or Leicester City academies. We just focus on grassroots levels. We focus on the players, just the no-name players playing at the grassroots level in UK. And I think. Personally, in the next couple of months, loads of clubs from Poland will be looking for the Polish players in the UK.
Okay, interesting. I hope you don't mind if I ask you for a bit of maybe some secrets and industry details. Would you suggest a name that we should all look out for as an emerging talent that you expect to be this next big thing, and hopefully English FA is not looking at them, so Poland can actually pick them?
In my head, it's just, I think at the moment, just one name. It's Viktor Gromek, who just Przemek knows him perfectly, I think. He was playing for Leicester City for the last couple of months. Now he just moved to Burnley. He just signed the scholarship, and I think that's the type of player which I really like. It's just something like combination of Bielik and Zielinski, so technical number 6, very good on the ball, very good on 1v1, like to move forward with the ball. So yeah, I really like him.
So Krystian Bielik of Derby and Piotr Zielinski of Napoli. Przemek, your turn. Some secrets, please. What are the names that we should look out for across both men's and women's football?
So with women's football, we have a few players like Victoria Front, who plays for West Ham, and she used to play for Arsenal. She's doing really well. There is Zosia Pierce in Birmingham City. We have another Zosia Szczęki in town. So it's not only about boys. So and we treat exactly the same way like girls, women's football as men's. Boys watch games and for girls and the boys, and we spend the same time analyzing men's and women's football. So it's exactly the same level. It's not like we're going to those big academies like Man City watching only boys. No, girls are treated exactly the same way, because I think the women's Super League, the women's football in England in 2-3 years time will be the best league in the world, and we can't miss it. We need to keep an eye on those talents.
But this is fascinating what you just told us. When it comes to women's football, Polish domestic league, it still has a lot to catch up with the women's game in England. What things they can benefit from? Is it the players, is it the coaching, or is it the way how the players are discovered or trained?
All those things, and for example, players in here like Daniela Kosińska, who moved to the UK from Poland. She played for Aston Villa, and now she's at Stoke and Birmingham. And it's just the facilities. For example, if you train every day at Aston Villa facilities and you meet John Terry, Jack Grealish, and you have university behind you, all the scientists, physiotherapists, it's just a completely different level. Like Emil mentioned before as well, that it's just football here in the UK for the young player. You're at a different level. Yes, so it's getting better in Poland. So don't get me wrong. Like football in Poland is improving. We can see it. We can see it. A lot of good coaches, a lot of good academies are cutting. Like the facilities, it's going up. But the funding that it's in the UK, in England, especially for women's football, is just unbelievable. And when you move here, when you play, you feel actually as a footballer, as a full professional footballer. When in Poland, very often you have to do some other job. Like in women's Super League, every single player has to have full-time contract. which is a huge difference because you can purely focus just on football, when in other countries you still have to work.
No, it's definitely different. Looking back at the game coming up, England against Poland, we cannot finish this show without asking you for predictions. What do you expect to happen?
Of course, I want Poland to win because I want to have some nice banter at work so I can say, oh, you can see, we're better. So I'm saying 2-1 and Zielinski and Lewandowski to score. And for England, probably high Kane. Nice one.
Emil, predictions, please.
It's hard to say, but I think I will say something similar to like Przemek. So, 2-1 for us, of course, for Poland. Let's say Lewandowski and Zielinski scoring. But for England, maybe
you don't even think about it.
Grealish. Yeah, I like this player, so Grealish. Let's say Grealish.
I must
if he
admit,
will play, of course, because that's another question.
True. I mean, the second panel is by far more optimistic about Poland's chances. I wonder why is that? That's strange. Thank you for joining us. Przemek Soczyński from Norwich, working for the Polish FA. Thank you very much. Emil Kot here in POSK Polish Center in London. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck in your season. And hopefully, Balam and the non-league football also kicks off soon.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for that.
Thank you.
And that will be it for the show. Thank you for joining us, and good luck to both teams in that game, both English and Polish fans. Unfortunately, we cannot be at the stadium, but we have a special teaser of what it would be like. The voice of Wembley, Chris Temple, is showing us, as a special guest, of how would he welcome Polish fans. Thank you I dziękujemy.
Hello everyone, my name's Chris Temple and I am the stadium announcer at Wembley Stadium in London. I hope you've been enjoying your look back at England against Poland down the years. I know you've been waiting the best part of 7 and a bit years for the rematch, if you like, and a chance for Poland to get a long-awaited victory in England. I'm sure it's going to be a cracking game. I hope, as I say, you've enjoyed your look back at the games throughout the years. I know Jakub and the team have done a brilliant job putting this video together. And as of course, we're going to be missing you Poland fans very much. I know there's going to be thousands of Poland fans watching right here in the UK. You won't be allowed, of course, into Wembley, which is such a shame. It would have been a fantastic atmosphere. So I thought we would do a little bit of a job and give you the sort of welcome that you would have got from me on the microphone at Wembley if you had been in the stadium. So a bit of a virtual Wembley Stadium, if you like. So here we go. Hello, good evening and welcome to Wembley Stadium for this evening's FIFA World Cup qualifier between England and Poland. Kickoff is at 7:45 and we offer a very warm welcome to Wembley Stadium to the players, officials and supporters of Poland. And that's where you would shout and make all of your noise, I'm sure. We hope at the community centre you're all going to be enjoying it, however you're going to be watching the game. I will say good luck to Poland, but of course, I have to say I do want England to win.
When there's the sands I'm falling into, when there's the sands I fall right through, I cherish the day I won't go astray, I won't be afraid, you won't catch me running. You're ruling the way that I move.